I now have both of the Atlantic 75 series, Stone Temple Pilots Analog Productions 45 RPM editions. They're fantastic. Let's talk about them. This music will forever be burned into my soul. I was a child of the 90s. My first gigantic love of music and defiance from my parents and all of that good stuff came with the onslaught of Nirvana and the Seattle scene. I personally cringe at the word grunge when describing music, but if it makes it easier to understand, okay, that's what we're talking about here. Stone Temple Pilots was a group that got lumped into that scene, but they were not a Seattle group like Pearl Jam or Soundgarden or Nirvana or Alice in Chains. They were actually from LA, but to me and everyone in that time, they were definitely a part of that scene, and rightfully so, but they did have a little bit of a different sound, and these two records are two of my all-time favorite rock records. Now let's get into the pressing of these, what they are, a little bit of history about the albums, and a comparison to the Walmart editions, which I completely understand is 100% not fair, but this is going to show you why I think all records from the 90s should be cut on 45 RPM vinyl, or even any record that was made for CD or later. This is going to dive into the mechanics a little bit of the vinyl process, but also show the difference in pressings with some examples and why it's important to consider different pressings. First off, we're talking about Stone Temple Pilots' Core. This was originally released in 1992 and reached number 3 on the Billboard charts. This came out on Atlantic Records, the same label as Led Zeppelin, who is a huge, huge influence on this band. In fact, STP is actually quoted as saying that they wanted to make this album like a Led Zeppelin album where you wanted to listen to the whole thing all the way through and it has like a similar vibe all the way through, and they completely achieved this. To me, this is like a greatest hits record. There are so many iconic songs on this, more on those in a minute. This pressing is mastered from the original master tapes from Ryan K. Smith at Sterling Sound, so I guess this was still recorded to tape even though it was recorded in 1992, which a lot of that stuff at the time was going to ADAT and things like that. This doesn't say AAA lacquer, but this is put out by Analogue Productions and they claim that it's all in the name. At any rate, it's also cut at 45 RPM on 2 LPs, which is extremely important, and we'll get into that later in the video. And this jacket is a beautiful Stoughton gatefold jacket that is the exact type of quality that you expect from Analogue Productions. And this and the next record are actually both part of the Atlantic 75 series. I did not get this as part of the subscription, which you can sign up for from Acoustic Sounds to get all of those, but mine is actually still numbered. In fact, I got this when they did a repress of it. It went out of stock for a minute at Acoustic Sounds, so I thought when I ordered it, I would get a non-numbered one, but that was actually not the case. You might see other versions of these records that are Atlantic 75 series, but they're clear variants or ones like that. They are cut at 33 RPM and they're not cut by Ryan Smith at Sterling Sound. And in my opinion, you don't want those. I'm sorry, Atlantic. You want these. These are $60, but it is definitely well worth the price, especially if you're a fan of this music or drums in general. Now let's talk about this album a little bit. Core was actually recorded in LA in May of 1992, but the group at the time was actually called Mighty Joe Young, and they started back in 1986 when their bassist and the lead singer Scott Weiland met at a Black Flag concert, and they started talking, and they actually realized that they were dating the same girl. It's kind of crazy. Like a lot of the Seattle bands and rock bands of the 90s, they started well before the grunge scene actually took off, and this album is an absolute masterpiece, and like I said, it plays for me like a greatest hits record. The opening of this with Dead and Bloated and the drums, how they just blast right in your face, just blows you away. Plush is a song that you could absolutely not escape at the time, and we'll get into more of that later with Purple too, but along with Even Flow also, I feel like those two songs, Plush and Even Flow, were constantly played everywhere that you wanted to go to, and it was like people were now into grunge music if they knew about Plush or Even Flow. But I personally, I love that song, and it's great to have it here on this record. And Wicked Garden is another one of my all-time favorites on this record, as well as Creep. Creep is one of the best STP songs ever, and one that became immortalized in their Unplugged edition. There was a video for it, and I feel like that video was played like constantly on MTV when I was younger. So many other songs, Sex Type Thing, Cracker Man, every single track on this record is good. This album is absolutely one of my all-time favorite rock albums, and what an amazing first album for a band ever. But then they followed it up with the next masterpiece that we're going to talk about. This is their follow-up, Purple, which originally released in 1994, and this was also released on Atlantic Records, and this pressing also done by Ryan K. Smith at Sterling Sound from the original master tapes, and is cut at 45 RPM. Again, I'm kind of shocked too that this one was cut off of master tapes, because this is recorded in 1994. This is also housed in a beautiful gatefold jacket that's also numbered. It's a lot harder to see the number on this one where they put it, but I bought this one as soon as it was announced in stock. So again, I'm not sure how they're handling the numbering thing on these. Like I mentioned, the last one I got is a repress and it was still numbered. I initially thought that the only numbered ones were coming from the subscription from Acoustic Sounds. It is just amazing to have both of these records in this format. Purple did release on purple translucent vinyl back in 1994, but I was a full-on CD kid at that time. This album propelled the band to mega stardom, and it's amazing that they were able to record this in less than 10 days, and it debuted at #1 in the US. Interstate Love Song and Vaseline are two of like the biggest hits on it, being played everywhere. I mean, you want to talk about Plush being played everywhere. Like Interstate Love Song and Vaseline were played constantly on the radio and on MTV. Just anywhere that you went, you heard those two songs. It was almost like people felt a little bit like STP was like grunge light, I guess, or like they were more acceptable grunge. I don't know, but maybe just the music was like better and just appealed more to the masses. I'm not sure. The group had so many things going for them at this moment in time. The momentum of core, the Seattle scene was erupting. The movie The Crow featured Big Empty in it, and that movie is a 90s mega hit for all the girls at the time.
And now know this. It's a costume party, so you have to wear a costume. But nobody better show up as the Crow. I'm serious. Every costume party, there's like 14 guys come dressed like the Crow because they want to look hot and hook up. It's lame. If you come dressed as the Crow, you're not getting into the party.
Your Halloween costume turned out perfect.
Yeah, it's okay.
They also did MTV Unplugged in between these two albums, which we mentioned before, which, side note, I just realized there's not actually an official release of STP Unplugged either on CD, cassette, or vinyl. Apparently it's part of the Core Deluxe Edition or something like that. You can get it if you go onto Apple Music and look under the Core Deluxe Edition. In the very bottom, they have like 7 of the songs from it. But please, if anyone is listening, I am pleading, I would absolutely love to have just a single vinyl of STP Unplugged. It would just be amazing to have. Big Empty, like I mentioned, is a big one on here, and Silver Gun Superman is actually another one of my big favorites on this record. I kind of forgot about it because I hadn't actually listened to this whole album in a long time. It kind of got played out when I was a kid, man. Both of these records, we would just play these constantly. Now, like I mentioned, I already had both of these records on vinyl from Walmart, and maybe you do too, or maybe you're considering them, and they're pretty cool. I mean, they're on splatter vinyl, and I was happy with them when I got them, but I was definitely not blown away by any means. But I have to say, in comparison to these 45 RPM editions, holy crap. I mean, it is not even close. And I'm going to give you a couple of samples that are listed in links below in the description. Definitely go download them so you can listen to them. And also tell me if you're getting anything from these samples. I'm considering doing this more and more in the future with like providing samples from this, but I'm not sure if the digital recording process that I'm using is legit or not, or if it's a good way to give a like neutral example to people on the internet. It's so tough to try to get you to hear what I'm hearing, but I'm going to set this up directly off of the phono stage in my system. It's going to come balanced out into XLRs, into a digital recorder, a Zoom F3, recording in 32-bit float audio in WAVE, and then I'm going to put those down below, and they've both been recorded at the exact same volume. And you're going to hear the comparison between these Walmart editions and these 45 RPM editions at the same exact volume with the same styluses and everything else. And oh my God, like there is a huge difference in the volume and in the quality and in the separation of the instruments and just everything versus this being truncated on a single 33 LP versus put onto 2 LPs on 45 RPM vinyl. The low end that you get from the 45 RPM records is what you want from a 90s rock record. The drums are like 4 feet out of my speakers. There is a lot more information here, so that's why it sounds a lot better, and you're going to hear that in the examples. As you get to the inner label of a record like these ones that are cut at 33, if you cram all of this information into a single LP, you actually have to bring the volume down to accommodate the noise floor on the record and to EQ it properly. At least that's what I understand. I've heard a little bit of that from Third Man Records, watching some of their stuff and watching them talk about how to actually properly EQ vinyl records. And I've actually heard Chad Kasem talk a little bit about it too, that with 45 RPM records, or with even just the record being cut on 2 LPs, the fact that you have more information on these versus cramming everything into a single LP on these, there's just less information and less room for noise floor and EQing properly as you get to the inner label. It's also why back in the day, a lot of songs would be cut with their best songs at the first track, and then a lot of the quieter songs would be towards the inner label of the record, since you can't put as much volume there. Again, I'm not exactly sure about how all this works, but that's my understanding of it. And if you listen to the examples in the description below, you're going to hear it. So go check those out. Now, how do they sound in comparison to each other? I got Core first because it came out in the Atlantic 75 series first, and it absolutely blew me away the first time I ever heard it. I mean, it was so good, and especially coming from the Walmart edition. Now, that set a really high bar for both of these records. So that's important to point out here. In the comparison of the two of them, we're really talking about A++ with Core and then A+ with Purple. Purple is really good, but I wasn't as blown away with it as I was with Core, and it might have just been because I had just been listening to Core so much and I was so excited for it that when I put on Purple, it didn't grab me as much as the other one did, but it's still really awesome. I would say that the drums are probably the main difference. I think they're a little bit sloppier on Purple versus the tightness of the sound on Core. But I also think that that might come from a couple of factors. I mean, first of all, I was definitely not listening to these records like this when I was a kid. When I was a kid, we never analytically listened to records at all. I just threw them on whatever way I could listen to them and jammed out. But as I got older and as I'm listening to these now more critically, I mean, there's definitely a difference in how the band recorded and approached Purple versus Core. Core has like a much more cohesive theme sound to it, whereas Purple kind of gets into a different area in certain songs. But it's not just in the recording of it. I do think that there is some EQing that's a little bit different on Purple. And if I had to give the edge to one of them, it would go to Core. But again, they're both amazing sounding records, and you are not going to be disappointed in either one of these. And they absolutely blow the Walmart editions out of the water. I've never heard original copies of these, but here's the thing, like we were saying with how vinyl is pressed and everything. First of all, vinyl was not being pressed a lot in the 90s when these records came out. They were mostly put onto CD. They have too much information on them to be put onto a single record. So when they were put out in the 90s, they were put out on single LPs. A lot of the times you can go track down an original pressing of like STP Core or, Alice in Chains Facelift or something like that. And they're not going to sound as good as something that is remastered nowadays, at least onto 45 RPM vinyl or done in a good way. Now, I don't have any really good pressings of Alice in Chains or anything like that, and I would love them. I would absolutely love some 45 editions of Soundgarden. Please, Chad, just put out some Soundgarden on 45 RPM. It would just be awesome. As for quality control, I am definitely happy to point out that these both arrived perfectly. And the only thing I will say is that the jackets are starting to be a little bit worn on the edge corners here, like right on the top edge corners, but I'm completely nitpicking here. This vinyl is completely silent, and I can play these records and crank them, and they sound absolutely amazing. When you do, you should actually crank them. I do have some 45 editions from Nirvana and Pearl Jam that both sound absolutely amazing, but like I said, please, Chad or any record label, do more of these 90s bands on awesome 45 editions with awesome gatefolds and things like this, so that all of us people who are getting old now can have them. Now, if you're still here at this point, you probably like this channel and you probably like vinyl, so you're probably gonna like some of these other videos. Go watch those right now. I'm gonna go chill to some STP on 45 RPM vinyl. I will see you on the next one.